A Cherokee warrior discovers a white woman nursing a child who bears his people's features. Everything he's ever known about honor and duty is put to the test. What he decides next will defy his tribe's laws and his own heart. Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. In the shadow of the Great Smoky Mountains, autumn painted the Cherokee lands in amber and gold. The year was 1858, and tensions between settlers and natives had reached an uneasy truce in this remote corner of Tennessee. Morning mist clung to the valleys as White Hawk, a respected Cherokee warrior, moved silently through the forest. His keen eyes scanned the terrain, not for game, but for intruders encroaching on tribal territory. At 32, White Hawk had earned his position as a tribal protector. His father, a Cherokee elder, had raised him with traditional values, even as their people faced increasing pressure from white settlers. White Hawk's broad shoulders and resolute expression reflected years of defending his tribe's diminishing lands. The boundary markers have been moved again, he muttered to himself, crouching to examine freshly disturbed earth. Settler encroachment was nothing new, but this pattern troubled him. He straightened, adjusting the leather strap of his hunting knife. The faint sound of singing stopped him. It was distant but clear, a woman's voice, singing what sounded like a lullaby. White settlers rarely ventured this deep into Cherokee territory alone, especially women. Curiosity and caution battled within him as he moved toward the sound. The singing led him to a small clearing where a modest cabin stood. White Hawk approached cautiously, staying within the tree line. Through the open cabin door, he saw her, a young white woman with auburn hair falling in waves around her shoulders. She was gently rocking a baby, singing softly. "Sleep now, little one," she murmured. "Your father would be so proud of how strong you're growing." White Hawk remained motionless, watching. Something about the scene before him seemed unusual. The woman looked weary, with dark circles under her eyes, and her clothing, while clean, was worn and patched in several places. But it was when she shifted the baby that White Hawk's breath caught. The child's skin was darker than the mother's, with distinct Cherokee features. A half-blood child. The realization struck him immediately. The woman suddenly looked up, as if sensing his presence. Her eyes widened in fear as she spotted him at the edge of the forest. "Please," she said, her voice trembling as she clutched the child protectively. "We mean no harm." White Hawk stepped into the clearing, his expression neutral. "You are far from town, woman." "My name is Sarah Callahan," she said, lifting her chin slightly despite her fear. "This is my son, Joseph." White Hawk approached slowly. The child's father was Cherokee. It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. "Yes, Thomas Running Deer. He died 3 months ago. Pneumonia took him before Joseph was even born." The name was familiar. Running Deer had been from a neighboring Cherokee band, known for his skills as a translator between natives and settlers. White Hawk remembered hearing of his death. "I know what people in town would say about us," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "That's why we're here. Thomas built this cabin before he fell ill. He wanted us to live where Joseph could know both sides of his heritage." White Hawk studied her face, searching for deception and finding none. Cherokee tradition was clear about outsiders, especially now, with tensions running high. But the child was of Cherokee blood. "Winter approaches," White Hawk said finally. "You cannot survive alone." Sarah's chin lifted higher. "We will manage. Thomas taught me many things." A sound from the forest edge made them both turn. 3 more Cherokee warriors emerged, members of White Hawk's hunting party who had been searching for him. "White Hawk," called out Stone River, the eldest among them. "What have you found?" White Hawk faced a decision that would challenge tribal traditions. The proper course would be clear: report the settlers' encroachment, regardless of her connection to Running Deer. The child, while of mixed blood, could potentially be taken in by the tribe, but the woman would be escorted back to settler territory. Instead, White Hawk made a choice that would change many lives, including his own. "This woman was wife to Running Deer," he announced. "The child carries Cherokee blood. They will need protection through the winter." Stone River's expression darkened. "This is not our way. The council—" "I will speak to the council," White Hawk interrupted. The child is one of us. Sarah looked at Whitehawk with surprise and tentative gratitude. She had expected to be driven away, not defended. As the other warriors reluctantly departed to inform the tribal council, Whitehawk remained. The tension between duty and compassion weighed heavily on him. "Why would you help us?" Sarah asked quietly. Whitehawk gazed at the small cabin, the struggling garden beside it, and the child who carried the blood of two worlds. "Running Deer was a man of honor," he replied. "His son deserves to know his father's people." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Most days I wonder if I've made a terrible mistake, trying to honor Thomas's wishes by staying here. But I couldn't bear the thought of raising Joseph where he would be treated as less than others, simply because of who his parents are." Whitehawk nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had seen how the world treated those caught between two peoples. "I will return tomorrow," he said. "There are repairs your cabin needs before winter arrives." As Whitehawk walked back through the forest, he knew the tribal council would not be pleased. But looking back at the small cabin where a brave woman nursed a child of two worlds, he felt certain his decision was right, even if it broke with tradition. Little did he know that this encounter would be just the beginning of a journey that would test not only his loyalty to tribal customs, but also open his heart to unexpected possibilities. 2 weeks had passed since Whitehawk's discovery of Sarah and her son. True to his word, he had spoken with the tribal council, facing their disapproval with quiet determination. The elders had reluctantly agreed to allow the woman and her half-Cherokee child to remain through winter, provided they stayed within the boundaries set for them and caused no trouble. Whitehawk found himself returning to the cabin almost daily, bringing game, helping with repairs, and teaching Sarah survival skills that Running Deer hadn't had time to share before his death. Today, as he approached the clearing, he carried a string of freshly caught fish. Sarah was outside, struggling to split wood for her fire. Her technique was poor, and Whitehawk watched her frustration grow with each failed attempt. Joseph was wrapped in a carrier on her back, cooing softly. "You will exhaust yourself before cutting a single log that way," Whitehawk said, setting down his catch. Sarah startled, then offered a weary smile. "Then perhaps you might show me a better way, instead of just telling me I'm doing it wrong." There was a spark in her green eyes that Whitehawk had noticed becoming stronger over the past weeks. The frightened woman he'd first encountered was giving way to someone with determination and even occasional flashes of humor. "Stand aside," he said, taking the axe. "Watch how I position my hands. It is not about strength, but about where the force is directed." Sarah observed intently as Whitehawk demonstrated, then awkwardly attempted to mimic his technique. Her first try was only marginally better. "May I?" Whitehawk asked, and when she nodded, he positioned himself behind her, adjusting her grip and stance. "Like this. Let the weight of the axe do the work." He was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the scent of wildflowers in her hair, of the child on her back watching him with curious eyes. He stepped away quickly. "Try again," he instructed, his voice perhaps more gruff than intended. Sarah's next swing split the log cleanly. She turned to him with a triumphant smile that momentarily took his breath away. "I did it," she exclaimed. "A good beginning," Whitehawk acknowledged. "Now you must do it 50 more times." Sarah laughed, a sound Whitehawk realized he hadn't heard from her before. "Always the stern teacher," she teased, readying herself for another attempt. As she worked, Whitehawk began preparing the fish. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the axe and Joseph's occasional babbles. "The women in your village," Sarah said eventually, pausing to catch her breath, "do they think it strange that you help us?" Whitehawk's hands stilled briefly. "They think many things. Some understand, others do not." "And what about you?" Sarah asked, setting down the axe and turning to face him fully. "What do you think about spending your days helping a white woman and a half-blood child?" The directness of her question caught him off guard. Cherokee conversations often circled around subjects, approaching them indirectly. Sarah's settler way of speaking still sometimes surprised him. "I think," he said slowly, "that a child should not suffer for the world he is born into." Sarah studied his face. "That doesn't answer why you, specifically, have taken on this responsibility." Whitehawk met her gaze. Perhaps it is because I understand what it means to walk between worlds. Seeing her questioning look, he continued reluctantly. My mother was not full Cherokee. Her mother came from another tribe to the west. I was always Cherokee in my raising, but there were those who reminded me that my blood was not purely of our people. Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes. I never thought, you seem so respected among your people. Respect is earned through actions, not given through blood, Whitehawk said. It is what I wish for your son, that he will be judged by his character, not his parentage. Before Sarah could respond, voices called from the forest edge. 3 women from the Cherokee village approached, led by Mourning Dove, the medicine woman. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Whitehawk, Mourning Dove called out, we were concerned when you did not return from hunting. Whitehawk nodded respectfully. I was teaching Sarah how to prepare for winter. Mourning Dove's gaze moved to Sarah and the baby. Her expression softened slightly as she looked at the child. The council speaks of nothing else these days but the white woman and her Cherokee son, Mourning Dove said. I decided it was time to see for myself. To Whitehawk's surprise, Mourning Dove approached Sarah directly. May I see the child? After a moment's hesitation, Sarah carefully unwrapped Joseph from his carrier and held him out. Mourning Dove examined the baby with gentle hands, murmuring softly in Cherokee. He has strong lungs, Mourning Dove commented, and his spirit is bright. But you? She looked at Sarah critically. You are too thin to nurse properly. The milk you make will not sustain him through winter. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and worry. I'm doing the best I can with what we have. Mourning Dove turned to the other women and spoke rapidly in Cherokee. They nodded and began unpacking bundles they had carried. We have brought herbs to strengthen your milk and food to strengthen your body, Mourning Dove explained to Sarah. A child of Cherokee blood must grow strong even if his mother is white. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Whitehawk watched with surprise as Mourning Dove instructed Sarah on preparing the herbs. The other women, initially hesitant, began examining the cabin, pointing out improvements needed for winter. By late afternoon, an unexpected transformation had occurred. The Cherokee women worked alongside Sarah, showing her how to properly seal the cabin's cracks, teaching her which plants could still be harvested before winter's grip tightened. As Whitehawk prepared to leave, Sarah walked with him to the edge of the clearing. Why did they come? She asked quietly. I thought your people wanted nothing to do with me. Whitehawk looked back at the women, now laughing as they played with Joseph. Our ways are strict, but we care for children above all else. Joseph is Cherokee, whatever else he may be. Sarah touched his arm lightly. Thank you, Whitehawk. Not just for the help, but for seeing us as people worth helping. The simple touch sent an unexpected warmth through him. Whitehawk nodded, uncomfortable with both the sensation and her gratitude. I will return tomorrow, he said as he had every day. As he walked away, Whitehawk knew something was changing within him, something that both excited and alarmed him. His people's traditions warned against growing too close to outsiders, yet each day he found himself more drawn to Sarah's courage and to little Joseph's innocent smile. The path ahead would not be easy, but Whitehawk was beginning to realize that some traditions might need to bend if his people were to survive the changing world around them. Winter had settled over the mountains with unforgiving intensity. Snow blanketed the forest and bitter winds howled through the valleys. 3 months had passed since Whitehawk first discovered Sarah and Joseph, and what had begun as reluctant duty had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Inside the small cabin, now properly insulated thanks to the village women's help, Sarah stirred a pot of venison stew while Joseph slept in a handcrafted cradle, a gift from Stone River, who had gradually softened his stance on the unusual arrangement. The cabin had become a curious meeting ground where traditional divisions occasionally gave way to human connection. Whitehawk stomped snow from his boots before entering, carrying an armload of firewood. His presence had become so routine that Sarah barely looked up as he added logs to the dwindling fire. The storm worsens, he said, moving to warm his hands. I may need to remain until morning. Sarah nodded, continuing to stir the stew. There's plenty to eat at least. Mourning Dove's root cellar design has kept our provisions well. The easy domesticity between them had developed gradually over the winter months. What began as daily lessons in survival had transformed into comfortable companionship. Whitehawk found himself lingering longer with each visit, watching Joseph grow, listening to Sarah's stories of her life before meeting Running Deer. "Joseph has been trying to turn himself over today," Sarah said with pride. "He's growing so strong." Whitehawk moved to the cradle, looking down at the sleeping infant. The boy's features were becoming more defined. His father's high cheekbones and dark hair, his mother's determined chin and expressive eyes. "He will walk early," Whitehawk predicted. "Children with spirit like his always do." Sarah brought 2 wooden bowls of stew to the small table Whitehawk had crafted in December. "You speak as though you've raised many children." A rare smile touched Whitehawk's lips. "My sister has 5. I helped with each one." "You've never spoken of your family before," Sarah observed, sitting across from him. "Do they disapprove of your time spent here?" Whitehawk considered the question as he ate. "My father died 2 summers ago. My sister's husband is a good man who provides well for them. They trust my judgment, even when they do not understand it." "And do you understand it?" Sarah asked quietly, her eyes meeting his across the table. "Why you continue to return day after day?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Outside, the wind howled fiercer, rattling the cabin's shutters. At first, it was duty, Whitehawk admitted, then concern for the child. "And now?" Sarah pressed. Before Whitehawk could answer, Joseph began to cry. Sarah rose quickly to attend to him, lifting him from the cradle and settling into a rocking chair to nurse him. Whitehawk averted his eyes, as he always did during these moments, out of respect. "You don't need to look away," Sarah said softly. Thomas never did. He said it was the most beautiful sight in the world, a mother nurturing her child. Whitehawk hesitantly looked back. The intimacy of the scene, Sarah gently rocking, her face softened with maternal love. Joseph's tiny hand pressed against her skin, stirred something profound within him. "Running Deer was right," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah studied his face. "You never speak of what happened to your wife." "I know from the village women that Cherokee warriors your age are usually married." "I have no wife," Whitehawk said. "I was to marry Summer Rain 6 years ago, but she died of the white man's spotted fever before our ceremony." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I shouldn't have asked." "It was long ago," Whitehawk replied, though the memory still carried pain. The spirits had other plans. The howling wind suddenly gave way to an ominous crack, and seconds later, a tremendous crash shook the cabin as a tree fell nearby. "Stay inside," Whitehawk commanded, grabbing his coat and hurrying outside into the blinding snow. He returned moments later, his expression grim. "A great pine has fallen across the path. We are truly trapped until morning now." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her concern as she settled Joseph, now sleeping again, back in his cradle. "Then we should rest. You can take the bed. Joseph and I will sleep by the fire." "I will not take your bed," Whitehawk insisted. "Then we will share it," Sarah said practically. "It's too cold for either of us to sleep on the floor, and the bed is large enough." Whitehawk's expression betrayed his surprise at her suggestion. Sarah sighed. "Whitehawk, I have a child. Clearly I am not an innocent maiden, and you are an honorable man. We will simply sleep, for warmth and comfort. Nothing more." After a moment's consideration, Whitehawk nodded. The logic was sound, even if the arrangement was unusual. As the night deepened and the fire burned low, they lay side by side beneath thick firs, a respectful distance between them. Joseph's cradle sat close by, within reach should he wake. "Tell me of Cherokee beliefs," Sarah requested quietly in the darkness. "Thomas began to teach me, but there was so little time." Whitehawk stared at the ceiling, gathering his thoughts. "We believe all things have spirit. The trees, the animals, the stones, all are connected in the great web of life." "And what of people from different worlds coming together?" Sarah asked. "What do your traditions say of that?" The question carried weight beyond simple curiosity. Whitehawk knew she was asking about her own situation. A white woman with a Cherokee child, but perhaps something more as well. "Our traditions?" Whitehawk began, then paused. "Our traditions were made in a time before the white man came. They did not anticipate the world as it is now becoming. And what of your heart? Sarah's voice was barely audible. What does it say? Whitehawk turned his head to find her watching him, her eyes reflecting the dim firelight. The months of shared work, of learning each other's ways, of seeing past differences to the person beneath, all of it crystallized in this moment. My heart speaks in ways that would surprise my ancestors, he admitted. Sarah's hand found his beneath the furs. Mine too. They remained thus, connected, but speaking no further, until sleep claimed them both. Morning brought crystal clarity after the storm. The sun sparkled on pristine snow, and the fallen tree that had blocked the path now revealed itself as less formidable than it had seemed in the blizzard's fury. As Whitehawk prepared to leave, promising to return with men to clear the path properly, something had shifted between them. Unspoken, but undeniable. "Whitehawk," Sarah called as he reached the edge of the clearing. She stood in the doorway, Joseph in her arms, both bundled against the cold. "What you said last night about your heart speaking in ways that would surprise your ancestors." He turned back, waiting. "I feel the same," she continued, her breath visible in the cold air. "I never expected to find friendship here after Thomas died." Whitehawk understood she chose the word friendship carefully, that she meant something deeper, but feared naming it. "The path ahead is not clear," he cautioned. "Few worthwhile paths are," she replied with a small smile. As Whitehawk made his way back to the village, he knew decisions loomed that would affect many lives. The winter had granted them a period of suspended reality, but spring would soon arrive, bringing with it questions from both worlds about the growing connection between a Cherokee warrior and a white woman raising a half-blood child. Whatever challenges awaited, Whitehawk realized he no longer viewed Sarah and Joseph as an obligation, but as something far more precious, the beginning of a new kind of family, one that might bridge the divide between two peoples who had known too much conflict and too little understanding. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and birdsong, melting away the last remnants of the harsh winter that had both isolated and united Whitehawk and Sarah. The forests hummed with renewed life, and with it came renewed complications. Word had spread beyond the Cherokee village to nearby settler communities about the unusual arrangement. A respected Cherokee warrior frequently visiting a white woman living alone with a mixed-blood child. Rumors traveled both ways, breeding suspicion and concern. Whitehawk approached Sarah's cabin, now surrounded by sprouting vegetable gardens she had planted with Mourning Dove's guidance. He carried news he was reluctant to deliver. Sarah was outside, showing Joseph the yellow butterflies flitting among early blooms. At 7 months old, the boy sat sturdy and alert, reaching for the colorful insects with delighted squeals. His features had settled into a perfect blend of his parents', Cherokee strength and settler delicacy combined in one innocent face. Sarah's smile faded when she saw Whitehawk's expression. "What's happened?" "Riders came to our council fire yesterday," Whitehawk explained, crouching to greet Joseph with a gentle touch to his dark hair. "White men from the settlement. They asked questions about you." Sarah tensed, gathering Joseph protectively closer. "What kind of questions?" "They claimed to be concerned for your welfare, but their words carried threats beneath them." Whitehawk's jaw tightened. "They spoke of a white woman being held captive among savages." "That's ridiculous," Sarah exclaimed. "I chose to be here. This is my home." Whitehawk nodded. "The council explained this, but these men had already decided what they wished to believe." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. "My brother David. It has to be him. He never approved of Thomas. And when I wrote to my family about staying here after Thomas died, David sent back a letter calling me confused and misguided. There is more," Whitehawk continued reluctantly. "There are also those among my people who believe it is time for you to return to your own kind. They say our ways are not meant to be shared with outsiders, that your presence here brings unwanted attention from white authorities." Sarah looked at him directly. "And what do you say, Whitehawk?" The question demanded honesty. Over the months, their relationship had deepened beyond either's expectation. What began as duty had blossomed into respect, then friendship, and finally something neither had been ready to name. Until now. "I say that paths once separate have now joined," Whitehawk answered, taking her free hand in his. I say that the spirits have brought us together for reasons greater than tradition. Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I am saying that I would make you my wife, if you would have me. White Hawk replied solemnly. I would be father to Joseph, and together we would face whatever challenges come, from your people or mine. Sarah's breath caught. The council would never approve. Some would not, White Hawk acknowledged. Others, like Morning Dove and Stone River, have already given their blessing, though I had not yet spoken to you. You discussed this with them before me? Sarah asked, surprised. White Hawk smiled slightly. Cherokee ways require harmony with the community. I needed to know if such a union would tear my people apart. And it wouldn't? Sarah asked skeptically. There would be difficulty, White Hawk admitted. But Morning Dove reminded the council that our people have always adapted to survive. Perhaps this is the next adaptation, learning to join with those settlers who respect our ways, building bridges instead of walls. Sarah looked down at Joseph, who was contentedly playing with a wooden toy White Hawk had carved for him. And what of Joseph? Would he truly be accepted as your son? He is already Cherokee by blood, White Hawk assured her. With me as his father, none would question his place among us. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering all that had brought them to this point. The grief of losing Thomas, the unexpected discovery by White Hawk, the winter of learning and growing closer, and now this proposal that would forever alter both their lives. My answer is yes, she said finally, her voice steady with conviction. But there is something we must do first. The following day found them riding in a wagon borrowed from Stone River, heading toward the settler town where Sarah's brother David lived. Joseph, wrapped securely against Sarah's chest, slept peacefully despite the jolting journey. Are you certain this is wise? White Hawk asked as the town's buildings came into view. His presence would likely cause a stir, if not outright hostility. If we are to build a life together, it cannot be founded on hiding or running, Sarah replied. My brother must see that this is my choice, freely made, and he must see the man you truly are, not the savage he imagines. White Hawk nodded, though his hand instinctively checked the knife at his belt, not for aggression, but protection if needed. The small trading post town buzzed with activity as they arrived. Heads turned immediately at the sight of a Cherokee warrior sitting beside a white woman with a baby. Whispers followed them down the main street until they reached a modest house on the outskirts. Before they could even dismount, the door flew open. A tall man with features similar to Sarah's emerged, his expression darkening at the sight of White Hawk. Sarah, thank God, he exclaimed, rushing forward. Step away from that Indian. You're safe now. Sarah remained seated, her hand finding White Hawk's in a visible declaration. I was never in danger, David. This is White Hawk. He has cared for Joseph and me since Thomas died. David's face flushed with anger. Cared for you? Is that what they're calling it now? I warned you about mixing with these people when you married that translator. Now look where it's got you. Living in the wilderness with a half-breed baby and a savage. White Hawk tensed but remained silent, allowing Sarah to handle her brother as they had agreed. Speak that way again about my son or the man I intend to marry, Sarah said, her voice cold with fury, and I will never set foot near you again. David's jaw dropped. Marry? Have you lost your mind? I've found my heart, Sarah countered. White Hawk has shown me more respect and kindness than any man I've known save Thomas. He loves Joseph as his own son. He has taught me to survive in a world that would have broken lesser souls. The townsfolk won't stand for it, David warned. There are laws against such things in some places. We're not asking permission, Sarah replied. I came out of respect, to tell you myself rather than let you hear it as gossip, and to give you a choice, be part of our family or don't. But know that this is my decision, made freely, and with full understanding of what it means. David looked from his sister to White Hawk, who finally spoke. I give you my word that Sarah and Joseph will be protected and honored among my people, White Hawk said formally. Our lives will not be easy, but they will be lived with truth and respect. Something in White Hawk's dignity seemed to reach David. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair in a gesture reminiscent of his sister's. You always were the stubborn one, Sarah. he said finally. "Father used to say you'd either change the world or drive us all mad trying." A tentative smile touched Sarah's lips. "Is that acceptance I hear?" "It's resignation," David clarified. "I don't understand your choice, but I've never been able to talk you out of anything once your mind was set." He looked at Whitehawk appraisingly. "If you're going to be my brother-in-law, I suppose we should at least shake hands." The handshake that followed was brief but significant. A small bridge across a vast divide. They did not stay long in town, aware of the growing attention their presence attracted. But as they drove away, Sarah leaned against Whitehawk, relief evident in her relaxed posture. "That went better than I expected," she admitted. "Your brother is more like you than you realize," Whitehawk observed. "Stubborn, but capable of seeing beyond what he was taught." 2 weeks later, under a canopy of ancient oaks, Whitehawk and Sarah stood before both their peoples. A small gathering of Cherokee elders and villagers, including Morning Dove and Stone River, alongside David and 2 other settlers brave enough to attend. Their ceremony blended traditions, Cherokee prayers and exchanges of symbolic gifts, combined with the simple vows Sarah remembered from her parents' faith. Joseph, dressed in a soft deerskin outfit made by the village women, watched with wide eyes from Morning Dove's arms. When Whitehawk placed a blanket around both their shoulders, symbolizing their lives now joined as one, Sarah felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. "2 rivers have joined," Whitehawk proclaimed in both Cherokee and English, "to flow stronger together than apart." That evening, as celebrations continued around the communal fire, Whitehawk and Sarah stood slightly apart, watching their unusual family. Cherokee elders bouncing Joseph on their knees, David cautiously accepting a bowl of traditional stew from Stone River's wife, children from both worlds playing together without awareness of the historic nature of their gathering. "Do you think it can last?" Sarah asked quietly. "This peace between our worlds?" Whitehawk followed her gaze, seeing both the beauty of the moment and the challenges that still lay ahead. "The path will not be straight or easy," he acknowledged. "But what we begin here today, this is the future. Not just for us, but for Joseph and children like him." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "A future where tradition bends but doesn't break. Where courage matters more than blood," Whitehawk added, his arm tightening around her waist. As night fell, and stars appeared above the mountains that had witnessed centuries of Cherokee life, Whitehawk and Sarah sealed their unconventional union with a kiss that promised a new beginning, not just for themselves, but perhaps for 2 peoples who had forgotten they shared the same earth, the same sky, and ultimately, the same humanity. Joseph's delighted laughter rang out across the gathering, a sound of pure joy, untainted by the divisions of the adult world. A sound that gave hope that the bridges built this day might someday grow strong enough to withstand the storms still to come.